Recording in progress.
Order the regular Emeryville Planning Commission meeting of March 28th, and the time is 6:30. Could we have a roll call, Chad?
Sure thing. Commissioner Chafe.
Here.
Commissioner Henme.
Here.
Commissioner Martinez.
Here.
Commissioner Wax.
Here.
Vice Chair Dram is absent, and Chair Gizzoni.
Here.
You have a quorum. Thanks.
Okay, now is the time for public comment. If we have any members of the public who are here and have comments on issues that are not on tonight's agenda but are in the purview of the Planning Commission, you may speak now. You have a comment, perhaps? We don't have any, and I believe the policy has changed for online comments. Is that correct?
Yes, the policy has changed. We're no longer accepting public comment via Zoom, as you may have heard. We do still accept online comment cards. However, when those come in, I will forward them to the commission. They won't be read into the record, and then you can respond as applicable. And for this section of the agenda, I have no online comment cards.
Okay, thank you very much. That's kind of regrettable that we have to withdraw that, but it's understandable under the reasons that it happened. Okay, so go ahead.
Is that apply for comments to agenda items such as, so it applies to all items?
Yeah, yes, that policy applies to all items. Now, this meeting is still being broadcast on Zoom. The Zoom link is still on the agenda, so folks can still watch it that way. They just cannot engage in public comment through the Zoom platform.
Why was that change made?
The change primarily was made due to what is termed Zoom bombing, but a lot of hate speech that has been experienced both at the City Council and at the advisory committee levels over the last several weeks.
Thank you.
Okay, now we can go to approval of the action minutes. Do any commissioners have comments on the minutes that we have? Okay, do we have a motion and a second to approve the minutes?
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Second. Okay.
On the motion to approve the the February minutes, February 22nd, made by Commissioner Chafe and seconded by Commissioner Wax. I'll call the roll. Commissioner Chafe.
Aye.
Commissioner Henme.
Aye.
Commissioner Martinez.
Aye.
Commissioner Wax.
Aye.
Vice Chair Dram is absent, and Chair Gizzoni.
Aye.
The motion passes. Thank you.
Okay, now is time for the director's report.
Thank you, Chair. For a brief recap of council actions since your last meeting on March 5th, the City Council authorized the submittal of an application to the Housing and Community Development Department of the state for pro-housing incentive pilot grant funding. This is round 2 of this program, and if successful, would result in about $650,000, which we plan to program for pre-development of the costs associated with affordable housing projects that are nearly underway. I mentioned this is the second round of this, and this is we were successful in securing a similar amount in the first round. This is a result of the pro-housing designation that we received from the state. You cannot be eligible for these funds unless you're a pro-housing jurisdiction. So it shows the benefits of that policy. On March 19th, the City Council held a study session on a tobacco retailer licensing ordinance. This is an ordinance that will require businesses that sell any amount of tobacco products to obtain a special license for that purpose from the city and to comply with various requirements related to retailing tobacco. The questions put to the City Council related to locational requirements and grandfathering businesses in, what happens on a change of ownership, as well as whether or not to do active compliance monitoring by our police department. The City Council gave direction on those topics, and this ordinance is expected to return to the City Council for a first reading at their meeting of April 16th. The council also heard the annual reports from 4 advisory committees and approved the general plan progress report, which was reviewed by you all at the February meeting. And then finally, the council approved the second reading of the Protecting Pollinators Ordinance, which included the turf ban for new developments that you reviewed at your January meeting. As I mentioned earlier, the disruption at City Council and committee meetings led to the change in policy for public commenting that we just discussed, and I reviewed the policy earlier in my comments, so I won't rehash it here. But that it was the last council meeting where that policy determination was made by the city manager. Events since we last met, the Healthy Families Festival and Egg Hunt was held at Hollis Park on March 23rd. A great success, even though it was rainy. And on March 27th, we held a BizNexus networking event at Flores, which was significant as it was the launch of the Emeryville Commerce Connection, which is a voluntary association of Emeryville businesses that's newly formed. And is the BizNexus series is set to be transitioned to be produced by that group. And it's been a long time coming to have an organization that represents businesses in Emeryville. Finally, I wanted to alert you to an accessibility needs survey that is accessible through the city's website in the newsflash section. This is related to the Round 1 pro-housing incentive grant that we received. So we are looking to formulate a program for those funds to help property owners, whether they're rental properties or ownership, to do accessibility upgrades that are needed. And this needs survey, there's 2 of them. One is for property, managers of multifamily units, and one is for residents. And the intent of that, they're really brief surveys, is to help form the basis of the program. And so I encourage you to take a look at that. I also want to announce that the Section 8 wait list of the county's housing authority is open from April 2nd to April 5th, and you can get to that through www.haca.net. This is for project-based Section 8, and housing choice vouchers as well. And then finally, there are micro grants available for arts and culture events. This is through the Rotten City Cultural District programs. And those applications are open through April 15th. These provide about $2,000 for support of arts-centric events. There will be 6 selected for 2024. There will be a future cycle in 2025. And that link is also accessible through the city's newsflash section on the website. And that concludes my report. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Does any commissioners have any questions on any of these things? Okay, thank you very much. Now is time for disclosure of ex parte communications, identification of conflicts of interest. I can't imagine that there will be any today, but on the odd chance that I didn't see something, let me know. Okay, then we move on to our only administrative item, which is the appointment of Commissioner Wax as liaison to Emeryville Parks and Recreation Committee. Thank you very much. Having spent some time on that, I think that's a very, very valuable committee to be on. Is there anything we do in regard to that?
Just a motion and a vote is all we need. I do want to clarify for the record that we termed this liaison in the agenda, but it's a full voting member. It's a unique feature of the Parks and Rec Committee. And so I just wanted to make sure that was clear to everybody. But yeah, all we're looking for is a motion and a vote.
I'll make the motion to appoint Commissioner Wax as a member of the Emeryville Parks and Recreation Committee with thanks.
I second it.
Second.
You beat him to it, but you defer your second to Commissioner Henry. On the motion to appoint Commissioner Wax as a member of the Park and Rec Committee, made by Commissioner Chafe and seconded by Commissioner Henry. I'll call for a vote. Commissioner Chafe?
Aye.
Commissioner Henry?
Aye.
Commissioner Martinez,
Aye.
Commissioner Wax,
Aye.
Vice Chair Dram,
Aye.
and Chair Guzzoni.
Aye. And thank you
Motion
very
passes.
much,
Thank you.
Commissioner Wax. Okay, now we go on to the study session section, and the topic, we only have one item. It's the auto-centric and personal storage uses item, and I think that we have a staff presentation.
Yes, we'll hand this to Planning Manager Miru Desai.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Planning Commission and Chair Gizoni. I'm Miri Desai, and I am going to be presenting this study session today. So the amendments to the planning code that this study session is going to go over were initiated by the City Council, and we had a study session in January. A lot of the presentation that I will be doing today will be the one that was presented to the council, and in addition to that, I will be reporting what direction we received from the council. So this is very familiar to you. In our city, we have a general plan land use diagram. And the second layer of that is zoning map, which divides the city into 16 zones and 6 overlay zones. And this is the land use diagram, and this is the zoning map. The key difference between the two is that the zoning map includes the PUDs, which are considered as zones, as you know. And this is the zoning overlay map. So the council is interested in 2 use classifications, and they relate to motor vehicle sales and services, under which you have car washes, dealerships, and gas stations. And the second classification that they're interested in modifying is storage and distribution, which is basically personal storage and distribution. So this is our existing use classification table. It kind of shows where the various motor vehicle sales and services are permitted, as well as where personal storage and distribution is permitted. The X denotes that it's prohibited in that zone, and the C, it denotes that it requires a conditional use permit. And I will show you maps that give you an indication of where in the city these different uses are permitted. In addition to that, I'd like to point your attention to 2 use classifications, the car wash and gas stations. These are currently considered uses of special concern. So if one were to come in today, it would require a major use permit, and approval would be the Planning Commission for that. So this is where car washes are allowed today in the city. Gives you an idea, it's basically in the MUR and the MUN and OT. These are the gas stations, where gas stations will be allowed, a lot few areas. These are the auto dealerships, which can be permitted today in a number of places in our city. And this is also the personal storage, where it is also allowed in a large portion of our city. In terms of existing uses that relate to these specific car washes, we have 2 car washes in the city, 1 car dealership, 3 gas stations, and 2 businesses pertaining to personal storage. And this is the location of these uses. As you can see, the car wash and the gas stations are kind of along Powell, and then you have the 2 storage systems, one along the 40th Street and one up in the northern part near the northern end of the city. And the Fantasy Junction is right here on Park Avenue District. So at the January City Council study session, this is what the council comments and directions were. They directed that car washes, gas stations, dealerships, and personal storage units be prohibited anywhere in the city. They acknowledged that prohibiting the above uses would make the existing businesses that I just mentioned legal, non-conforming. And they also indicated that at this time, they did not feel that any changes need to be made to the auto body shops. In addition, the council gave direction to staff to create a separate use category for showrooms for alternative fuel vehicles. The reason behind that was that it was pointed out that in today's business, a number of car dealerships, and especially the the electrical vehicle businesses, are creating showrooms in different parts of California, which do not operate in the same way as car dealerships, meaning the main difference is that they no longer do the inventory and storage on site as a typical car dealership typically does. So the showrooms are essentially for people to come, look at the vehicle, and test drive perhaps, and then make the purchase either online, and then the vehicle itself is delivered in other forms, and I will talk a little bit more about that. The council also wanted to see what would be the appropriate size of these showrooms, and indicated that they would like to see them in the mixed use and the industrial zones of the city. In addition, they also gave direction that we create a separate use category for electrical vehicle and green hydrogen charging stations and allow them in certain zones. So regarding the fuel showrooms, the staff report kind of gives you all the research that was done in order to come to this information for you. We researched about 8 neighboring cities and found that the cities do not explicitly call out the sale of EV vehicles as separate from auto vehicle dealerships. So basically, it's a traditional dealerships. Nor do they call out electrical vehicle showrooms as a standalone use category. The language around showrooms is limited to whether showrooms are permitted in certain commercial and mixed-use zones, and in most cases, it does not delve into the specific development standards, such as the size of that showroom. Staff also visited 6 showrooms in the Bay Area. 3 are in Corte Madera, 1 is on 4th Street in Berkeley, 1 in Palo Alto, and 1 in San Jose. And they were, as the staff report indicates, 3 of them were Wistfan and 3 were Tesla showrooms. So the main purpose of these showrooms at these locations, as I mentioned earlier, is to test drive vehicles and help out with the purchases which are done online. They store about 3 to 10 vehicles, and they are stored typically in the parking lot. Most of these showrooms are located in where you have private surface parking areas and also garages. And so the test vehicles are typically stored in the public parking lot. And the size of these showrooms vary between 1,800 square feet to 5,000 square feet. So when the vehicle is purchased, most require pickup at a secondary location or at the vehicle manufacturer's headquarters, or the vehicle gets delivered to the customer's home. In terms of alternative fuel charging stations, typically alternative fuel and auto charging station regulations are permitted to whether alternative fuel stations are at all permitted in certain zones in different cities. And in most cases, the regulations don't delve into the development details or the parameters outside of the commercial and retail regulation that exist already in those zones. Also, the regulations for EV charging stations are primarily intended to ensure that they are allowed at all and that they are compliant with the applicable building and electric codes. So with that, the proposed changes to the Title IX that are being proposed are, there's a new definition, there's 2 new use classifications, and that table that I showed you is going to be changed. So let's start with the definition, and that is the definition of alternative energy vehicle. And as you can see, it is restricted to electricity stored in batteries or fuel cells, as well as those powered for green hydrogen. So anything that is hydrocarbons, including diesel, would not be included as in this category. The two new use categories are one, the alternative fuel vehicle showrooms. So here, given the council direction, this is showrooms only for alternative fuel vehicles. It would not apply to your regular auto, gas or hybrid vehicles. And it means indoor showrooms for alternative vehicle fuels for sale or lease without incidental storage of the said vehicles. So that's the main idea here, is that we want to conserve our land use to uses that do not consume a lot of land. And that's the rationale behind all these changes that are being proposed. And included in this new use category is the size of the showroom. And we picked 5,000. And we felt that it was big enough for what we have seen in practice in the 6 locations that we saw. In terms of charging, the alternative fuel charging stations, again, this is for EV charging stations where this would be allowed, and what accessory uses would mean minor repair services and sale of packaged food, replacement parts, and accessories. Obviously, the charging stations typically are going to go in areas where, while patrons are waiting for their vehicle to get charged, there are other things for them to do in terms of retail or entertainment. So, a location like Bay Street would be actually quite perfect if they were able to have this kind of a use. Today, they would not be allowed. Well, let me rephrase that. Yes, today they would not be allowed at Bay Street. So this is the proposed change to the table. Everything in yellow is basically saying is the change, and X is that it's prohibited. So if you look at the first line, the car wash, the ones that are shaded in yellow are the changes. These were where it was allowed before or allowed today, and will not be allowed moving forward if this were to go forward. Then you have the dealerships, again, the same concept. It is not going to be allowed anywhere. In terms of alternative fuel showrooms, here, this is a new category, like I mentioned. So all of it is yellow. And the only place that we are recommending that these be allowed is in MUR, MURS, MUN, as well as the 2 industrial zones we have, which is INL and INH. And going down to the gas stations, it was prohibited in most of the city, except in the MUN, and now that is also will not be allowed moving forward. In terms of the alternative fuel gas stations, this is the new use category, and we are proposing it to be allowed in the various mixed-use areas of the city, which include MUR, MURS, MUN, and that's where we are proposing that these be allowed. The last line is personal storage, and it indicates the areas where it is currently allowed and will no longer be allowed if this were to move forward. So that kind of concludes my presentation. These are some of the questions. In terms of the changes to the table that I just showed you, are they acceptable? Are there any other changes that the commission wishes to make? Also, the definitions that I gave you of both the vehicle as well as the use categories, whether they are acceptable, and does the commission agree with the zones in which these 2 new use classifications would be permitted? So that concludes my presentation. In terms of next steps, it's currently scheduled to come back to you next month for approval, for recommendation to the City Council for approval, and it will go to the council. It's scheduled for May 21st at this time.
Thank
I'm
you,
happy to
Maria.
answer any question.
Yeah.
You very briefly mentioned a rationale, which I think you said something about land. Isn't there for such a law, aren't there requirements to have a very complete rationale stated? And is that the only argument that's being made for these changes?
Yes, the two main arguments that the council is interested in making these changes is to reduce, to reaffirm a commitment to reducing auto-centric uses. And the second one is to ensure that the land that is available for these auto-centric uses is limited. So that is the two reasons for initiating the changes that the council said.
So what does that have to do with storage units?
Storage, again, is seen as a use that is not the highest and the best for a city which is only 1 square mile. A lot of times, it is also allowed in a lot of a good area of our city. We have received often inquiries regarding having personal storages along the I-80 corridor. For example, the atrium site, the one where the personal storage is, that was, there was an inquiry where they wanted to put personal storage there. 5801 Christie, that's the Wells Fargo. I fielded a question 2 weeks ago from an appraiser saying whether personal storage would be would be allowed on that site. So there is a reason, that's the main reason why personal storage is included in this. It doesn't quite jive with the motoric auto-oriented classifications, but the use of land, I think, is the common theme among the two.
And how does this impact existing uses?
They will be considered legal non-conforming.
Which
So
means?
they will continue to operate legally. If they need any kind of finances, often we get asked whether this is a legal use. We would say, yes, it is legal non-conforming. So they don't lose any stature in terms of their business.
So
If there was an earthquake and it was removed completely, then they would lose their, if it is 90%, there's a 75%, if there was a fire, right? And if the use was destroyed where it would need 75% replacement, anything less than 75, they would be allowed to reestablish. Anything more than 75%, then they would lose it. And that's pretty standard for any legal non-conforming uses.
Okay. The other question I have is, you did research into other cities for the auto sales. Are there any other cities in the Bay Area that prohibit, like this law would prohibit? Gas stations or storage areas or car washes?
Whether they prohibit, I'm not aware of any city that does that. I'm not aware of any city that outright prohibits auto uses like car washes, car dealerships.
I might chime in to tear off that. I likewise am not aware of anyone with quite this breadth of prohibition on auto-centric uses, but gas stations in particular, yes, there are a number of jurisdictions that within the last 2 or 3 years have banned new gas stations. I want to say Santa Rosa is one of those cities. City of Los Angeles actually was considering one at one time, and there's a number of other smaller cities. Oddly enough, it kind of originated in the North Bay. I believe Petaluma was the first city to ban gas stations outright.
The last question I have is about are there any legal impacts, meaning does any of these prohibitions, are they questionable in terms of a taking or a legal limitation?
I can take that question. No, the city attorney's office has reviewed kind of the proposed regulations here, and we don't have any legal concerns in terms of enacting a zoning ordinance that would accomplish these goals that the city council has set forth and that Miru has just described in her presentation. There are no spot zoning concerns. The proposed zoning changes are well within the police power of the city and of the city council as a legislative body.
Sorry, I had one more question. You mentioned that car repair or auto body repair was removed from consideration of, why was it removed?
That's what the council gave us direction. that they were not interested in pursuing auto body use as being prohibited or modifying the process of how we permit auto body uses. Maybe Chad wants to add?
If I might, we bring that up because it's within the same realm of use classifications. It's a subtype of the auto sales and repair, and so we felt it worthwhile to mention that, you know, not everything is being is being suggested to be changed by the city council.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Martinez?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question was partly answered, but if we were to move forward with these regulation changes for the legal non-conforming businesses, what happens when the business closes? Can they sell that property entitled as it is to a new gas station, for instance?
As long as the property is not vacant for a certain number of months, they can sell that business to another similar business.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner Chief?
Thank you. I had a question about the definition of alternative fuels. So I think right now, if I have it written down here, it focuses on electricity stored in batteries or fuel cells and vehicles powered by renewable fuels such as green hydrogen. You mentioned no hydrocarbons. I think there are some exceptions maybe to that. I mean, it gets pretty complicated, but renewable gasoline or renewable diesel, for example, I think would be considered a hydrocarbon, but it's also renewable. Do you have any further information on the definition or how it might be aligned with other documents?
So we did consider that, but ultimately, you know, the renewable, I mean, gasoline ultimately, and both gasoline and diesel are hydrocarbons. And given the direction we received from the council, initially it was included, we pulled that.
Okay.
But, you know, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I think we can get to comments later, but in the current definition, I think it would still qualify because it's considered renewable. So you might want to just consider like all the, you know, the range of definitions for renewable and like what would be included there. Because I think that this is probably one of the trickiest parts is that we have a suite of fuels that are available right now, but that's changing. Like green hydrogen wasn't a thing a couple years ago,
Right.
and it wasn't a nuanced definition the way it is now, and that's going to continue to change into the future. So I think that's going to be one of the trickiest parts because that underlies then the definition of alternative fuel vehicle as well. So it applies to both the showrooms and the charging or fueling stations.
And we can certainly do more research when we bring it back next month in terms of beefing this up to include what you are mentioning, and so allowing it to be future-proof, so to speak.
Exactly, yeah. I had a question about something that I saw in the staff report, but I didn't hear about today, which is I think RVs or recreational vehicles are currently in the definition of the showrooms, if I remember correctly.
Correct. It includes the current definition of dealerships, not showrooms. We don't have showrooms. That's why we are creating one. The current definition of dealerships includes everything, from motorcycles to, you know, what you have, what you were suggesting, from cars, motorcycles to recreation vehicles. But we are not using that definition for showrooms.
Okay, so for showrooms, it would be restricted. So many of those use cases or types of vehicles would no longer be allowed in the showroom.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. You just don't see them, you know. I mean,
yeah, totally. I had one other question here, but now, I guess my other question is, taking a step back to the question about reasoning for this policy. And it sounds like, I think you've answered the question already, but when I was reading through, one of my questions was that like this could have climate change implications. There could be alignment with some of the climate policies that the city has put into the Climate Action Plan 2.0, for example. There are also air quality implications. Sometimes when you get into these really detailed discussions of fuels, the two don't necessarily line up. So my question was basically, is this coming from a climate perspective and or an air quality perspective? But it sounds like the answer is neither. It's more about land use. Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other? Commissioner Wax?
Speaking of land use, some of these proposed carve-outs are sometimes parking intensive. Would the surface level parking allowed for any of them change based on being that kind of business? One of the ones that we're looking to,
You mean for the showrooms?
yeah, showrooms or charging stations.
So the charging stations will be on private property entirely, right? The showrooms, what we have looked at, the examples where we've looked at, what they have done is that they may have 2 to 3 vehicles inside the showroom, and then for test vehicles, they will park it in the parking lot of their business center. Or in the case of San Jose, they parked it in the garage. So this is basically using public parking, be it on street or be it part of a commercial development. So the way our reasoning was that since we in the city do not have minimum parking requirements, if a business were to use a public parking space, then it is making better use of that parking garage, for example. And Bay Street is a perfect example of that. Does
Okay.
that answer your question?
Any other question? Commissioner Hemney?
And one more question. I looked up the 2000 Powell car wash. Is it in the garage?
Yeah. Which is very unusual.
Not necessarily. I've seen it in other places, including, for example, the Marriott Hotel in Oakland has detailers and things like that. I guess. So
It's
how
still
is
using
how,
up space,
how is
though.
that a use of space
It's still
exactly?
using up space and land, right?
A good use of space, I would think.
Well, that is, I mean, it's the same, whether it's covered or uncovered, it's still use of land. Because if you have it inside, you're just covering it up. The same amount of land is still needed in order to have your business, right?
All right.
Okay, if there are no more questions, then we will move on to the public hearing. It is now 7:06. If there are any speakers wishing to speak, you may speak for a period of up to 3 minutes.
Chair, before, just
oh,
one last comment I
okay.
would like to make that I
We're not
forgot
in
to
public
mention.
hearing then, yeah.
Was that all these autocentric uses, car washes, gas stations, we have not received an inquiry or an application. Let's talk about application for the last 20 years. For personal storage, the last time we processed the one on city storage was 12 years ago. So it's not that we are getting, inquiries where car washes and dealerships are inquiring all the time. But personal storage, like I mentioned, we do get inquiries for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we will now open public comment. It is 7:07. If there are any audience or speakers who wish to speak, you may do so for up to 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Hong Ho. I represent Hackman Capital Partners. Hackman Capital is a landlord, an owner and operator of real estate in Emeryville. We own and operate approximately 250,000 square feet of office, lab, and industrial use buildings. Of particular interest to me is my industrial building at 67th Street. I am currently in negotiations preliminarily with a alternative fuel auto-related user. And when they got wind of this potential use change, they brought it to my attention, which then prompted me to participate in the January 16th City Council meeting. I've since read this report and compared my notes, and I just wanted to make 2 comments. My first comment is I just wanted to commend Chad and Maru for putting this report together because I think it accurately reflects my interpretation of the City Council's intentions, which was to specifically focus on modifying 4 uses, which we've discussed. I think it does an excellent job of carving out showrooms, and it provides a clear path forward for any landlord, tenant, or my potential user to install and construct one if they so desired. And I think if they saw this report, I think it would encourage them to move forward in negotiations and pursuing the industrial use building that I have. My second comment really focuses on the alternative refueling station, because this particular user would have an auto-related use, probably with an ancillary refueling, recharging station. So I just want to make sure there's nothing here that would limit them from constructing such a recharging, refueling station, because obviously it would impair their operations moving forward. So thank you for your time, and appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Okay, thank you for your comments. We appreciate it. I believe you left your eyeglasses there. Okay. Okay, seeing as there are no other speakers, this concludes the public hearing. The time is 7:10. I'll bring the matter back to the commission for deliberation. Do we have anybody who wishes to make comments or thoughts on this? Commissioner Martinez?
While staff pointed out that the only inquiries and applications in the last 20 years have been for personal storage use, I have, strangely, I on a podcast I listened to, they mentioned, I'm looking at a article on Bloomberg right now. It came to my attention that private equity is really hot on car washes right now. In fact, they're flooding a lot of cities, and local authorities are getting a little perplexed and upset because they take up a lot of room and don't bring in any jobs, because they're largely automated businesses that bring in a lot of money for these private equity firms, but don't bring a lot of benefit to communities. So I think it's actually strangely timely to head this off before. I know there's one on San Pablo that I see driving my son to school, which is largely empty but taking up a lot of room on a very busy state highway. So I think it's interesting that we see this coming before us, and it's, while it's not necessarily spelled out, I feel like the city council has a vision to tackle the highest best use for these definitions, and I personally can see it bringing more vibrancy to a neighborhood, activating the streets better, and thinking about revenue generation. These are not necessarily uses that will add to the coffers of the general fund of the city as much as, say, alternative fuel vehicle showrooms or other more modern retail or other types of uses. And I think it's good to be mindful of how we're using our space as a very, very small city.
Thank you. Commissioner Hemme?
Thank you, Commissioner Martinez. I think that's a much more thoughtful analysis of these, the motivation for these measures. I find the whole explanation for this very questionable, because it's saying that it's not about being auto-centric, and yet it's encouraging auto showrooms. It's adding a new use that is not even in there, and the suggestion is, okay, some kinds of autos are fine, but other kinds are not. And I think that's an important distinction, because that's the draft we saw on the agenda included car repairs. I'm glad you took it out, because cars do need to be repaired, and auto bodies need to be repaired, including electric cars. Cars also need to be washed, including electric cars. So I think to me, the whole motivation for this is not well explained. I think Commissioner Martinez's explanation is much better. That it's highest and best use, the whole idea that, how does the city evolve, and et cetera, et cetera. So I think we should strike the idea that it's being against auto-centric, because it's not being against auto-centric. It's being against non-renewable or electric cars. That's what it's against, which that's a different statement. And, like, for example, I think the car wash in the garage at 2000 Powell is a great use of space. And because it doesn't impact, and I also think the car wash on the Shell station is a great use of space. It takes up almost no land at all. It encourages people to use that Shell station and add to our tax revenue and our base. If people are in that office complex and they're driving into the garage and parking the car, it probably only takes something like 2 or 3 parking spaces. And, and an office is service for people. Now, I also agree that a large car wash on San Pablo, for example, is not a good use. But in that case, it's more, it may even be a size issue. Like you put this 5,000 square foot on the showroom. Well, we could say car washes should be no larger than, whatever area on a site. And that would be a much kind of more nuanced regulation. Because I think there are reasons, people do like to have their cars washed, including electric cars. In fact, I would argue probably Tesla owners keep their cars cleaner than probably other people. So that I have a problem with the idea of the car wash. I think the idea of the gas station to me seems much clearer because it's clearly hydrocarbon. The storage units I also find questionable, except maybe, from maybe the same argument. I looked at that one on not the one on the north, but the one in the south, and it looks like it's in an older light industrial building or something. And again, it seems like a good use, frankly, in that building. I wonder, if it weren't there, would that building have sat vacant, for example? So I would not want people to be building one of these giant storage units anywhere in our city. But again, it may be a more nuanced approach to the thing, or at least, like I say, that one building that it's in looks like an adaptive reuse, and it seems like a pretty good adaptive reuse, probably. Thank you.
Any other comments? Mr. Wax?
Yeah, I think that how few applications we've had for these uses over the last 12 to 20 years is probably a pretty good indication of how suitable our land is for these uses most of the time. We currently have gas stations, we currently have car washes. I think if we were voting on just eliminating those things from our community, this would be a very different discussion. But not only do we have gas stations, but I understand at least one of them will sell for nothing. So I'm not like super worried about losing our current supply. I am much more worried about highest and best use, certainly. I'm pretty worried about vehicle miles traveled on our roads, and there's definitely a huge difference in the relationship between trips and miles traveled when you're going to a gas station as opposed to auto service. I can also tell you that, like, with all of the cross planning that I'm doing, I have a lot of headaches on Powell that are all adjacent to our current valued gas stations when it comes to trying to build a better city for pedestrians, for active transportation, for transit. These uses just create all kinds of different problems. And I think we probably have as much of them as we currently need. So, so far from what I've seen, I'm in favor of this.
Chief?
Yeah, I don't have too much more to add. I think some really good points have been made here. My comments earlier about being very careful in the definitions stand, and I'd encourage city staff and council to look towards other definitions that have been used in similar contexts, just to future-proof as much as possible without unintended consequences. I think your points, Commissioner Wax, about the knock-on effects of having services geared towards cars in our community are really important. And I think that as we can reduce those, that's where we're really going to feel a difference in terms of how auto-centric Emeryville is. We don't have a lot of land. And if we think about what we want to see for our community in 10 years, does that include gas stations? Does it include more gas stations? I think certainly no. Does it include any gas stations? I think, time will tell, but the more we can do to dissuade people from using gas stations and from servicing vehicles in our community, I think that will change the feel of how we move around our community. So I'm generally in favor of this as well.
Vice Chair Graham?
Yes, I think in general, this is a really good proposal and follows the general plan. I think it's good to think about the auto repair and body shops to include in this proposal. Other than that, I don't have any other comments. Thank you.
Okay, for myself, I would say I'm generally supportive of this. I think that Commissioner Martinez and Commissioner Henme raised some interesting points. And I think of the things such as car washes, they are, as Commissioner Henme points out, something that there is a need for. But I think that when I conceive of those things, I think of in terms of social space, because to have a large plot like the one on San Pablo in the middle of a neighborhood is disruptive. It reduces the social value of the neighborhood. It reduces the strength of the community. It makes it not a good place to be. It also increases the problems that happen when you have a weak community, and decreases the general value of that as a special place that people want to be. So when you have very compact, efficient car washes, I don't really have a problem with that. When you have something, anything, even just a parking lot that is just largely a dead use, that's something that any way we can see to reduce it would be good. Along those lines, but not directly raised here, I do think that we're going to see more use of parking lot in that type of area for charging stations. And I think of being innovative and trying to think of ways to make those socially valuable spaces, since people will be there, not just to have consumer items near there where you can buy this or that, but actually make it something like a park location, something where people can be around a space that's not just asphalt, that's not just machines, but a place that people are comfortable doing things with each other and building a sense of community, because people will be there for some time. And to also make sure that those spaces are safe, because people are charging sometimes late, and you don't want people being concerned for their welfare when that's happening. Other than that, I really don't have any comments. Other commissioners have made comments that I agree with as well, but those are the two things I want to dial in on. Thank you. Commissioner Wax.
Am I going to remember what I was going to add? Oh, yeah. So going back to the question of these uses that we are carving out that are parking dependent, and how that parking is considered probably to be maybe independent, going to a public parking lot, going to private parking or something like that. Is there anything that we can do to make sure, if we have one of these incoming businesses, or indeed anyone else, where instead of them utilizing we can maybe encourage them to maybe try to make a deal with the owner of an existing underutilized parking structure? I guess Bay Street was already mentioned. We certainly have more than that. If there is anything we can do to encourage that, I think that would be great. That's it.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Then that's a staff question I have. Would there be required parking for these vehicle showrooms? Required parking per the zoning code for a vehicle showroom?
We have no minimum parking at this time.
Oh, that's right.
Okay. I think, do we have any more general comments on this? Do you have what you need from us? Yeah. Okay. Then I think we can, or now at the end of the thing. We have space for general comments.
I have actually an issue that I've been thinking about how to address for a while. I was first pondering this when we were talking about the requested change from BPAC that elevators be able to accommodate cargo bikes, and the solution that we came up with was to have cargo bike storage on the first floor. What I was thinking about in that meeting actually is the amount of first floor centric robberies that take place, and whether or not that was something maybe we wanted to accommodate. And of course, one of those is this rash of robberies, usually taking place in the middle of the night where a vehicle is used to traverse the sidewalk and ram a building. Anyway, days after that meeting, the building that I live in was hit again by one of these. I believe that was a third or fourth time that this happened. One of those businesses has closed down since then. And it's kind of a delicate subject. A lot of it is completely out of our purview, but the part that interests me is the fact that what you have when one of these robberies takes place is a car traversing at some momentum over the pedestrian space, right? This is something where, under most circumstances, we would want to make it more difficult. And so I guess the question that I have, and maybe we can have a discussion about it sometime if somebody has, ideas in more detail, or maybe this is just a high staff, just something to think about, is especially, I know that the ATP is calling for a complete streets program, and that's something the BPAC is clamoring for, and this is the kind of consideration that could possibly be thought about when we're thinking about our ideal design of a street, especially since a lot of those ideal designs have retail frontage to them. One of the important things about this, I think, is the fact that store owners a lot of times have some skepticism about adding bike lanes to the front of their businesses where maybe they had surface level parking before. And I definitely think, hey, in our designs, we've made it a little bit harder for a vehicle to crash into the front of your store. If we can find a way to do that, just makes it that much better of a set of design principles. So that was one thing. The other that I wanted to bring up is that I think we're all aware that money is expensive right now, which is one of the reasons we don't have quite so much design review to do, which seems like a great time if any members want to add any future agenda items about maybe any thing we want to review in the code or anything like that we think needs to be changed. That's just sort of a call for y'all.
Sorry, Commissioner Wax, I wasn't totally clear on your first point about what was the concern, or what is the issue that you were pointing out about?
With the robberies?
Yes.
So this is, of course, correlated with the massive increase in car theft that's happened in the area. A lot of that has had to do with manufacturer level stuff, just like so far beyond anything that Emeryville can do anything about. But with this glut of stolen cars, it has become popular to just take a car and ram open the front of a store and rob it. It happened to Flavors, which they did probably at least 10 times as much damage to the storefront as goods they could have possibly stolen from there. So it's started happening over relatively trivial stuff. Happens a fair amount on San Pablo because it doesn't have the best street design right now. So yeah, my point is that like when we upgrade our street designs, we might be able to think about ways to make it harder for cars to traverse, because we also don't want them, hitting pedestrians.
Commissioner Martinez?
I think that's a really good point. And I'm just curious what staff's take is on the best, quickest way to address this. And I would be really interested in quick build solutions, bollards. But I would defer to staff on what the most reasonable avenue to address this type of issue.
We'll discuss it internally. Yeah. Yeah, and get back to you.
Commissioner Chief? Anything? Vice Chair Jam? Okay. I like the idea that you're talking about too. We did that at one point when Chair Keller was here. We had a general discussion. And I do think that while we normally are in a reactive mode based on what the market is bringing to us, we're not necessarily always there. And we have late agenda items that possibly if people have something that they want to have a general discussion about on ideas, that can be productive. It was when we did that before. What would be the best way of doing that? Would people be able to just email you, Chad, with suggested topics?
Yeah,
or-
that works. And then I can review that, I recall that, but I don't
Yeah.
recall it well enough to give, specific instruction that session that we had with Commissioner Keller. But if you have topics that you're interested in, yeah, feel free to email me, and then again, we'll talk
Yeah.
about potential ways of packaging things or addressing them.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, well, that adjourns this meeting at 7:30.
Recording stopped.